Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Moments ago, we heard from President Joe Biden in an unprecedented Oval Office address where he defended his decision to withdraw from the Democrat nomination, bizarrely on a social media post. So was that justification enough? It seemed like it was half a justification, half a campaign speech from the Oval Office, but Joe Biden also said that he wanted to pass the torch to the next generation. Listen to this.
In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? I believe I know the answer to these questions because I know you, the American people. And I know this. We are a great nation because we are good people. When you elected me to this office, I promise to always level with you, to tell you the truth. And the truth, the sacred cause of this country, is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much, a cause of American democracy itself, must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there was a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
Wow, I think I just fell asleep there. That wasn't really all that inspiring, but we haven't really come to expect much more from Joe Biden, even though rumors and, of course, all of the speculation on Capitol Hill was suggesting that it was possible that Joe Biden may actually resign his presidential office tonight. We didn't see that, and Joe Biden did pledge to continue to work very hard for the American people over the next 6 months. Remember, though, only from the hours of 10 a.m. to, what is it now, maybe 6 p.m., and, of course, he still has to take his afternoon nap and so forth. So he did set out a little bit of his vision for the next 6 months, unless he does resign his office before then. And I'm predicting that he just might, because having Kamala Harris as an incumbent would be really a boost up for his campaign. I wouldn't put it past the Democrats at all. But this is what Joe Biden said is his vision for the next 6 months.
For the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I'll keep defending our personal freedoms and our civil rights, from the right to vote to the right to choose. I'll keep calling out hate and extremism. Make it clear there is no place in America for political violence or any violence ever, period. I'm going to keep speaking out to protect our kids from gun violence. Our planet from climate crisis is the existential threat. And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. And I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform. You know, I'll keep working to ensure America remains strong and secure and the leader of the free world.
Well, for more reaction, let's bring on Gerard Filitti, who is the senior counsel for the Lawfare Project. And Gerard, what did you make of this speech from Biden? I mean, my question was, couldn't he have done this instead of that really weird, like, electronic signature message on social media?
Well, he should have done this. He should have looked the American people in the eye and explained what he was doing and why he was doing it. But tonight fell far short of an explanation. It was a combination of a farewell speech and an attack on Donald Trump. We've heard how many references to saving our democracy, protecting protecting democracy, exactly the type of inflammatory rhetoric that he said he would not engage in, especially when he's saying in the same speech that he's calling out hate and extremism and there's no place for political violence, yet he is being divisive and engaging in rhetoric that does nothing but disunify this country, not bring it together. So that was very disappointing. And he's also engaging in campaigning, essentially saying that he'll do in 6 months what he has not done in 3.5 years. It's really mystifying why he gave the speech at all.
Yeah, I mean, this I don't think really added anything in terms of clarification on exactly what happened or why in this moment he decided to withdraw. He didn't really talk about his health. He didn't talk about anything. It was just sort of this rah-rah Kamala Harris along with this withdrawal. But doesn't he now just appear to literally anyone, including foreign leaders, but especially Congress, which is still majority House controlled by Republicans, as just a lame duck? I mean, how can he even think that any priorities are going to get pushed through in the next 6 months?
Well, he absolutely is a lame duck. He is the definition of a lame duck, and nothing will get through in the next 6 months. The only thing that will happen is he will have a platform where he will take a bow and accept credit for everything that he has claimed to have done well in the last 3.5 years. And this will be basically a valedictory to his presidency, and everyone will speak highly of him and laud him for doing the noble thing and stepping aside for the next generation. So this is going to be 6 months of positive news and positive relationships with everyone, trying to portray himself as the elder statesman, no pun intended, who can bridge the gap with the younger generation and set Kamala Harris off on the right path. But the problem is, it's not clear that he's capable of doing even that. This speech was troubling as the debate performance. He's looking at the teleprompter. He's getting a little bit mumbled. It's not clear that he will last out the next 6 months of his term.
Yeah, and speaking of, all of these elements of just hypocrisy and being a lame duck and so forth, I mean, it's been the Democrats that have continued, as you rightly pointed out, to say democracy's on the ballot and we're saving democracy, we're protecting democracy. He had so many references replete throughout this speech, and yet it's the Democrat Party that not only attempted to take Donald Trump off the ballot, but now they're forcing Kamala Harris on the ballot when not a single person actually voted for her. And, that's not really what Benjamin Franklin meant, when Joe Biden referenced, we're a constitutional republic if you can keep it. Yeah, we're a constitutional republic, if we just install our candidates. That's not really what the founders were going for.
Now, this harkens back to the old days of smoke-filled back rooms where party bosses determined who the candidate was and who would be appointed to office. No one voted for Kamala Harris to be on a ballot. She was appointed by Joe Biden and confirmed by backroom conversations with party delegates and superdelegates. Not a single American voted for her to be on this ballot. Yet she is the Democratic candidate. Which is more than we can say for anyone else. And if this is not the ultimate irony, how do we describe this as democratic? How do we describe this as preserving the republic? This is not how an election should be conducted, where someone is merely appointed to take someone's place. And the flip side of this is something that we always have to wonder whether this was the plan all along, whether the plan was to have Joe Biden be the candidate until the last minute and then replace him with someone that the party deemed to be more fitting and a better shot of beating Donald Trump. We saw the polling numbers, and the Democrats pulled the trigger pretty much at the last minute to replace him. So there will always be skepticism of how an unelected in the primaries candidate became appointed to be the candidate for president by the Democratic Party.
And the GOP and the Trump campaign is certainly questioning that. Speaker Mike Johnson has referenced that there may be potential lawsuits, and we saw the Trump campaign file an FEC complaint. I mean, are the Democrats stuck with Kamala Harris when we're seeing this rallying to her and securing enough delegates within the first 24 hours just because she does have access to that war chest and it's an easier legal argument? Or is that something that you think that the Trump campaign could actually prevail on?
I don't think to be honest, I don't think it's a legal argument that the Republican candidates or that Donald Trump should go pursuing, because it's ultimately not going to lead anywhere. The money can be transferred to her campaign with various mechanisms that are all perfectly legal. It's just a matter of bureaucratic steps. So challenging it, okay, you throw some wrenches into the works ultimately it still happens. Challenging her on the ballot likely is not going to result in anything, because no state is going to say that the candidate of a major party before the convention is not going to be allowed to be on the ballot, when most states have provisions that say that whoever the party deems at its convention to be their candidate will be on the ballot. So this is really a matter of the Trump campaign focusing on the issues and focusing on how unqualified Kamala Harris is. That her record is that of Joe Biden, but worse, because we've seen her track record in the Senate as Attorney General in California, as a prosecutor. And all these things speak to her inability to be doing a proper job of leading this nation. If you stick to the issues, you win. This is the border czar who made immigration so easy that we've never had so many people crossing over the border before. This is a person who cannot solve simple issues without breaking into song and dance. That's what you go on. She cannot govern because she has not sufficient experience, and everything she's done, everything she's touched behind the scenes with Joe Biden, who, let's also add, did she know that his mental status was what it was? Who was really running things? Why was she not reporting to Congress or the cabinet that her boss did not have the capacity to continue serving as president? All of these questions need to be answered, but those are what we should focus on, not legal challenges.
Yeah, and I think this may just be a delay tactic from the Trump campaign, and certainly, he appreciates lawfare enough just for the headlines. But I would agree with your analysis there that this ultimately isn't likely to result in really, anything that's moving forward. So, just in about the last 30 seconds we have here, do you think that this speech actually helped boost Kamala's campaign at all?
I think it did nothing for Kamala's campaign. I think what it did was disappoint some Americans who thought higher of Joe Biden than after the speech. But I think this is valedictory. He is stepping back and letting Kamala take the reins, and this basically was his farewell address.
Yeah, it really was. Well, Gerard Filitti, really appreciate it. And there's a lot more that is happening from Capitol Hill. And we'll be right back with our political panel and also Josh Hammer right after this to discuss more. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping, too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to MyPillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel addressed Congress today for the 4th time, making him the foreign leader that has addressed Congress the most times, even more, and surpassing Winston Churchill. So his remarks come at a very contentious time for the Middle East conflict. And Speaker Mike Johnson, who is a very prominent Protestant Christian, supports Israel, as I do, and I certainly applaud his theology and his policy there, welcomed Bibi Netanyahu to a thunderous applause from Congress. And Netanyahu's remarks, which lasted about an hour, centered on America's support for Israel and why it is so important for Israel to win overall. And he said that his message to Congress and to the American people is that we, Israel, will win. He also said this:
our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends. This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
All right, let's bring in our guest tonight, Josh Hammer, who is the senior editor at large for Newsweek and also the host of the Josh Hammer Show. So, Josh, what did you make of Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress, how he was received, and overall where we go from here?
Look, I think there were high expectations for this speech. It took a little while for Prime Minister Netanyahu to get going. I don't think he really hit his stride until a solid 20, 25 minutes in. Now, having said that, a lot of those earlier moments were very heartfelt moments. I mean, he was honoring soldiers, those who have been grievously injured, those including that one soldier who literally ran 8 miles to get his rifle to go hunt down some terrorists. But once he hit his stride, I thought he made basically all of the relevant points. Look, at the end of the day, Jenna, as he said, as I've been saying here to these college students that I've been talking to all week, America's fight is Israel's fight, and Israel's fight is America's fight. You can oftentimes tell a different country apart by whether or not they have the same friends and the same enemies as you. Israel's enemies and America's enemies are essentially one and the exact same. I actually was speaking here this week with someone who was from Tehran. He's from Iran. He actually lived in Tehran until he was 16 years old. He now lives here in America. He was telling me something that I actually had never heard, Jenna. This actually kind of shocked me. In Tehran, when you're growing up, apparently, with this evil Islamist regime in power there, literally from kindergarten through high school, their version of the Pledge of Allegiance, we pledge allegiance to the American flag. Their version of the Pledge of Allegiance is that they solemnly vow each and every day in school that they will destroy Israel and America. The little Satan and the big Satan. That is Islamic Republic of Iran ideology. And the reason for that is very simple, which is that in the minds of our enemies, we are essentially one and the same. And it's no surprise that if you go to any kind of pro-Israel rally, I've been to a couple since October 7th, you will always see American flags. You will always see American flags. By contrast, when you see the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas side, as they were here in D.C. today, outside Union Station, outside the Capitol, they are burning American flags. They're literally burning American flags. So that is probably the most important point, I think, from an American U.S. national interest perspective. And I thought that Netanyahu did a very effective job of driving home that point. Obviously, hopefully, we'll see if it shifts the needle at all when it comes to public sentiment. But thank God for now, the American people still broadly support Israel.
Yeah, and I've been really frustrated to see so many people on the right say, well, we're America first, as if that means that we can't also simultaneously support Israel. That's just nonsensical, and they don't get the greater, bigger picture here, and also how, America doesn't exist in a vacuum. We actually need world allies, and Israel is one of our oldest and longest friends. But let's turn also to the meetings that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to have with Vice President Kamala Harris, and then also former President Trump, and this is the matchup that's being set for a Trump versus Harris election in November. How important are those private meetings as well?
Look, Jenna, I'm an American. I, by definition, am also America first. But these people who kind of pound their chest and say America first, let's abandon Israel, what they're not really thinking through, Jenna, is that if you actually want an America first approach to the Middle East, if you actually want to prudentially be able to scale back America's retrenchment in the region, if you want to be able to kind of take troops out of harm's way in bases like Tower 22 in Jordan, where 3 Americans were tragically killed in January, the best way to do that is to empower Israel and the more moderate Sunni Arab states like the UAE, like Bahrain, like Egypt, aka the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords that the Trump administration and Netanyahu pulled off is literally the path towards an America first foreign policy in the Middle East. That's why Donald Trump, I think, instinctually understood that. So these people just aren't thinking this through very clearly, frankly. The America first answer in the Middle East is actually, as paradoxical as it may sound, to embolden Israel, to get them to make peace with the UAE and, God willing, Saudi Arabia, such that they can patrol their own region and contain the Iranian threat. Now, when it comes to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Netanyahu's meeting with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago on Friday, it's going to be very, very interesting. Kamala Harris is known to be even further to Joe Biden's left when it comes to this particular issue. She's been basically begging him to speak more sympathetically about the Palestinians for months, as if he's not doing that already. It's kind of crazy, to be honest with you. But the most important thing to me is whether or not Netanyahu and Trump can repair their relationship, because Trump was peeved at Bibi Netanyahu for silly reasons, frankly, if I'm being honest, after the 2020 election, when Netanyahu did as every world leader has to do and acknowledge the new incoming president. I really hope that they can patch things up, because they did amazing things together in office with the Abraham Accords. And if Trump gets back into power come January 2025, We need Saudi Arabia as part of those peace accords, and those two really, really need to be on the same page.
Yeah, and hopefully, yeah, I mean, Donald Trump, if he can do anything, it's always to repair relationships. I mean, it's amazing to see some of the total enemies that he's had. Then they kiss and make up proverbially, and I hope and expect that will happen. But turning back to Kamala Harris, who is now the presumptive Democrat nominee, and just this kind of whirlwind, just landslide coronation, really. I mean, she hasn't earned any of the vote, but she is the presumptive nominee now. Her husband is Jewish. There's speculation potentially that the governor of Pennsylvania, even though he's come out and said that he's kind of said he's not interested in the vice president position, Josh Shapiro out of Pennsylvania, but there are potential Jewish allies that could be part of the Democrat ticket and her own husband. And so how does that potentially influence, if at all, the Democrats' position here?
When you are a Jewish man like Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, is, I'm going to be very personal and blunt and brutally honest here. When you are a Jewish man who makes a decision to marry a non-Jewish woman who has not gone through a conversion, you are by definition not taking your faith particularly seriously, because Judaism is matrilineal descent. What that means is that their children, they don't actually have children together. But if they hypothetically had children, those children would actually not be Jewish under Jewish law. And that's going to sound very personal, Jenna, but it's actually making a point, which is that you have people like this who are totally detached from their religion, and including on Capitol Hill today, there were actually a lot of Jews for Palestine, Jews for Gaza, whatever. These are not people who represent the Jewish people, who represent American Jews, who represent Jews more generally here. It's total, utter nonsense. The left loves taking these token self-hating Jews, putting them on a pedestal and saying, look, I found even a Jew here who was this or that, and somehow they support my evil, iniquitous cause. But that doesn't actually mean anything whatsoever. So Doug Emhoff, I frankly view as a joke. Josh Shapiro is slightly more serious. I mean, he's very far to the left on most issues. He takes a nuanced, middle-of-the-road approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. From what I can tell, he's probably slightly more reasonable than Joe Biden. That doesn't mean that he's as pro-Israel based on the track record as, frankly, Donald Trump was or anything like that. But yeah, on the margins, I think Josh Shapiro probably would be quite capable, actually, of peeling away moderate suburban Jewish voters who, on the margin, actually could matter in some swing states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, places like that. So I think Josh Shapiro is actually a formidable pick, frankly, if he does end up being the VP pick.
Interesting. Well, a lot of things to consider there. We're already out of time for this segment, but we'll be right back with more with our political panel here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. And continuing to discuss the political fallout from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress this evening, let's welcome in the political panel. We have Ryan Helfenbein, who's the executive director of the Standing for Freedom Center at Liberty University. We also have Scott Uehlinger, who is a former CIA station chief, and Auron MacIntyre, who is with The Blaze. So, Scott, let's start with you. There's been all of this footage about burning of an American flag in protest outside of Union Station in DC. We saw some of the protesters actually go up to Capitol Hill today. So what do you make of this? Do we know who these groups are and whether or not they've been organized, funded, those sorts of things?
Well, certainly what I've seen online does indicate funding. The group of protesters, let's say it's roughly 300 people, were seemingly bussed into the area. And in fact, this prompted Netanyahu during his discussions to talk about Iranian funding, which has been fairly well established. And having spent a CIA career overseas, operating against Iran, I definitely know the way they do things. And this definitely has, Iran is probably illicitly supporting this through a couple of cutouts and all. And but of course, the Biden administration is not really in a hurry to enforce this, because the Biden administration and the Iran and they make friends with that country, which is a sworn enemy of the United States.
And Auron, what do you make of this scene and all of the response from, the squad who's sitting there looking, Rashida Tlaib is looking like she's at a tailgate rather than in Congress with this ridiculous war criminal sign and, all of these responses to Benjamin Netanyahu's speech?
Sadly, this is one of the inevitable costs that comes when you place yourself at the center of mediating these kind of foreign conflicts. And when you go ahead and import a large number of people who don't share your values, have no attachment to any of the history that you feel you have with a given foreign nation or its policies or any of its diplomatic priorities. Ultimately, when you continually import people who hate the country, hate its associates, hate different people in the Middle East that you might be making peace with, you're going to end up with these kind of protesters. They may be funded from outside sources, there may be pressure from elsewhere, but ultimately we're cultivating this atmosphere when we continue to import people who simply do not jive with our culture.
Yeah, and Ryan, let's talk about the evangelical perspective. You're there at Liberty University with the Standing for Freedom Center. Obviously a Christian university, and we've seen from Speaker Johnson, his faith that has been very prominent. And it was an interesting contrast, with Benjamin Netanyahu being very secular, but he is part of the nation of Israel. He's the head of the state of the nation of Israel. And in terms of the policy overlap here, there are so many evangelical Christians that support Israel, not just because of the blessings in Scripture, but also because we understand that God promised the Holy Land to the nation of Israel. And that came out very prominently, actually, today in Netanyahu's speech when he talked about being the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and of the kings of King David and King Solomon. I mean, that rich history. And so what did you make of those remarks and the fact that, just this imagery of Speaker Johnson, one of the most prominent evangelical Christians right now, and I think in the highest position in the country as an evangelical, standing right behind Benjamin Netanyahu for this?
Yeah, I think it's important that biblically we understand that we trace our heritage back to the same Old Testament, to the same promises given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as a Christian people, and then certainly as a nation that has derived so much of its policies and principles from a people that ascribe to the Christian faith, right? So there is no greater friend of Israel traditionally than the American people. And this goes back to pre-World War II. The Jewish people have been here in the United States ever since its founding. So it's really important to understand that this is not new, holding to a position that is affirming and supportive of the nation state of Israel. But to recognize, I want to go back to what Auron said earlier, just with regard to this new kind of rise of whether it be Arab Americans or whether it be Iranian sympathizers.
And we gotta leave it there, Ryan. I'm so sorry. This is a real quick segment, but we'll be right back with more with our political panel right after this. And we're back with the political panel. So there was testimony on Capitol Hill today furthering the investigation into the assassination attempt of former President Trump. And we heard from FBI Director Christopher Wray. And this was really interesting to me that he actually brought a lot more to the table than the now resigned Director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle. This was one of the really interesting pieces of information that we gleaned from that testimony today.
And so one of the things that I can share here today that has not been shared yet is that we've just in the last couple of days found that from our review, to your point about devices, analysis of a laptop that the investigation ties to the shooter reveals that on July 6th, he did a Google search for, quote, how far away was Oswald from Kennedy?
And Scott, let's again come to you first. This was really fascinating to see some of these Google search histories, and then later on in the testimony that there was this conveyance or legal transfer of the firearm apparently from the father to the shooter, his son, about a year in advance of this shooting. So it didn't appear to be procured just for this incident. What do you make of the testimony that we heard today from Christopher Wray?
Well, anything that man says, I take with a grain of salt, because remember, this is the same individual who sat on the Biden laptop for more than 3 years. So he's going to give the information he wants to give and not one iota more. So with that in mind, that is interesting information. But there's some other things that have come up also today that were of interest. For example, apparently a sweep of the shooter's apartment, there was no silverware there. And there were like a minimal amount of, I guess, household effects, almost indicating that the place had been swept clean by someone else. So I find that rather disconcerting. And plus, we also have more footage of the rooftop and basically more information that the forces that were in force for protecting the president had at least 10 minutes advance notice that there was somebody on the roof, but yet it didn't even occur to them at that point to tell Trump not to step out on the stage. So, okay, the FBI is giving us some information, but as I said earlier on your radio program, the startling incompetence that we're seeing with these people who are supposedly charged with protecting a president should be startling and disgusting to the American people.
Yeah, and so Ryan, we've heard from the Secret Service now that they are advising Team Trump not to hold any further outdoor rallies, at least for the time being. And this is, of course, going to affect the campaign and the overall strategy. There are a lot of outstanding questions here. What do you make of where we're at and where we're not at in the investigation at this point?
Well, there's so many questions that remain, and certainly it is a little suspect that the Secret Service would even be directing the campaign and with regards to where to go. Now, certainly there is a vested interest in the safety and the security of former President Trump. Certainly there is that, but there also has to be an understanding too that there is a priority that his campaign cannot be directed or manipulated in some way by a federal agency. And that's where I would be a little bit cautious. I think a lot of people right now are a little on edge and wondering, who can we really trust? These are the people that are supposed to be, and they're sworn to uphold and protect the Constitution. But there's a lot of erosion of public trust around these agencies, the FBI, the Secret Service, the CIA, and it's for good reason. Because we have seen that erosion over the past few years.
Yeah, and Auron MacIntyre, you've written pretty extensively recently and even have a brand new book talking about the decline of institutions, largely due to the worldview of the left. I mean, does this just play into that theory?
Absolutely. I would echo both Ryan and Scott's reticence to believe anything that comes out of these organizations. The FBI has been spending a vast majority of its time under Christopher Wray, who himself was a Trump appointee, let's not forget, talking about the dangers of white Christians in the United States, how they're the real danger, they're the real terrorist threat. It's the MAGA Republicans. They're the ones that are going to come for us. They're going to be the real domestic terrorists. And now we see that they were not focused on people like the shooter. They have not been protecting us against many different people who have, again, been imported inside the United States to create violent situations. Their focus on the heartland of the United States as a domestic threat, instead of actually serving as a protection for the people who are supposed to be here, obviously reveals their motives. I think it's very clear that when we have a shooter in this situation who seems like a very convenient ghost, just had no ideology, had no social media footprint, just no information we could possibly find about them, when we see all of the faults, all of the failures of the Secret Service, when we see the FBI just unable to pull any answers together, we should recognize that there is, of course, incompetence, but at some point, the level of incompetence rises to malice.
Yeah, and so Scott, this question continues to just boggle me, how a 20-year-old could be more savvy and more informed about the landscape and the security failures and all of these things at this rally than like the entire Secret Service that was there and local law enforcement. And at some point, as we've talked about before, coincidences just become too many, where it starts to seem more into what, of course, the left is calling conspiracy theory land. But it's also fascinating to me that the only thing that the Secret Service director was absolutely confident about was that this shooter acted entirely alone. There was no coordination with anyone else. And that was echoed today in Christopher Wray's testimony. That seems to be the only thing that they're absolutely 100% certain confident about. But we won't get the rest of the report for another 60 days. That's a little weird.
Right. Exactly. It's highly suspect. And again, to echo my colleagues, we cannot trust anything that members of these institutions are saying. The investigation needs to be much more deep, and was only very reluctantly resigned her position, which probably was just a way for her to take heat off of herself in a desperate attempt to kind of push the investigation aside by her resignation. Fortunately, it's moving ahead a little bit. But I guess I want to say something else that I think the American public needs to hear, and that is that on occasion, hosts on programs have talked about they're very quick to protect the the freedom-loving and loyal servants of the FBI or the CIA or the Secret Service, and that it's only a problem with leadership. And as somebody who spent an entire career in the CIA, as well as a 28 career in the United States Navy, I can tell you that that is no longer the case. These people who are our public servants, for the most part, were promoted and advanced based on DEI initiatives, starting all the way back in the Obama administration. So we're talking quite a number of years ago, 16 years ago or more. So these people rose from the lower or mid-level to the very highest level. So unfortunately, it's not a case of just leadership. It's an institutional failure of our educational institutions, et cetera, that have created generations of people that don't look up to their own country. And so these types of people are going into the modern FBI and CIA. And this is one reason why all of these institutions, you're seeing a massive nosedive in competence, because they no longer have pride in their professions. They no longer feel that they are serving the United States. They're instead serving some kind of political agenda. And so unfortunately, it shows that the housekeeping, what has to be cleaned up to straighten out these institutions, is far more substantial than a lot of people understand.
Yeah, and Ryan, in just the last about 45 seconds we have here, I mean, you and I have talked a lot about universities and DEI, which is why, Liberty University wants to teach truth and actually prepare students to love their country and, do all those good things. How big of a threat really is DEI compared to the left kind of just saying, oh, forget it, it doesn't really matter. CRT doesn't even really matter.
Yeah, it's an existential threat to education and to the American future. And at the end of the day, it must be absolutely defeated and uprooted from every institution, including higher education. I couldn't agree more that it's a cesspool of woke indoctrination everywhere. And so that's where you're seeing in these federal agencies as well.
Yeah, well, we'll be right back with more of the political panel to talk about the future of the country right after this. And finally tonight with the political panel, we have Ryan Helfenbein, Scott Uehlinger, and Auron MacIntyre. Let's talk about the future of our country. So we are in a setup for Trump versus Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee of the Democrat Party without earning a single vote. And last time she ran for president, she got less than 1% in her primary, had to drop out, and then, of course, was selected as vice president. So this is setting up just a really interesting election that is now less than 4 months. And Auron, I thought that the Democrats were the party of democracy and saying democracy is on the ballot. And now suddenly their brokered convention just says, well, who cares about any of our voting base? Let's just install the candidate that we prefer and just pretend that this isn't just an elitist leftist coup.
Say what you want about Donald Trump, the man. His one skill, his one invaluable skill is making the left just rip their mask off at every opportunity in their zeal to defeat him. Obviously, Kamala Harris, like you said, has never won a primary, has no business being the candidate. I mean, from what I understand, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, that was an 81 million vote record-breaking ticket. And now you're going to break it up with 0 primaries to go ahead and just install this person in. It has nothing to do with the democratic process. It's absolutely absurd. It's wild to imagine the fact that it seems like both of the candidates of either party, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden, were at some point tried to be removed during this process. This is democracy in the United States at this point, and it's only going to get worse as the Democrats attempt to go ahead and pretend that Kamala Harris is within striking distance of Trump pretty much anywhere. They're going to have to work pretty hard and stretch pretty far to pretend like they can go ahead and fortify an election in her favor.
Yeah, that's such a great point that the Democrats not only have taken their own candidate off the ballot, but they tried to take the Republicans' candidate off the ballot as well. I mean, this is a part of democracy, though, ladies and gentlemen. So, Ryan, to Auron's point, I mean, Kamala Harris is wildly unpopular. She has a lower favorability rating than even Joe Biden himself. I mean, 1% less than the least popular president in American history. And yet suddenly all these celebrities, all of these, women and a lot of minorities are suddenly coming out and championing her and saying it doesn't matter about her past, none of this. And there was a report yesterday that Speaker Johnson and some of the GOP leadership said, don't attack Kamala Harris based on race or gender. Let's just go after her policies. What do you make of that particular strategy, and how effective might that be when you see a lot of, frankly, Black women that are rallying to Kamala Harris just on the basis of identity politics?
I think that the left, and certainly those in the media, I saw Van Jones saying this even earlier today, they're going to use identitarianism, they're going to use identity politics in order to prop her forward. That's at least to try and suppress any kind of actual substantive criticism. And I think that's absolutely wrong, but it is a political play that they're going to use, that you cannot bring criticism to her candidacy because of her voting record, let's say, as senator in California, or her record as attorney general in California. I mean, she is the most left-wing candidate to date that has ever run for the office of president. And ironically enough, to Auron's point, she never won one Democratic delegate in presidential history. So here she is. And this is now democracy in the way it's being redefined. But this is like the bad sequel to the Marvels movie, right? The money is already there. It's already been spent. So now they have to roll out this kind of manufactured enthusiasm behind a film nobody wants to see. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Even with Act Blue, that's trying to manufacture grassroots donations right now to suggest that somehow that she raised more money than Barack Obama and that she has raised more money than Joe Biden. And that's simply, the facts just don't line up with that reality.
Yeah, and but this is our constitutional republic, and this is where we're at. And so, Scott, just in the last about minute and a half we have here, because this is the state of America, I mean, there are a lot of people that are very concerned with the assassination attempt of former President Trump and all of the questions surrounding that. And now we're seeing just some, really weird convergence of a lot of things going on in DC politics that are clearly orchestrated by the left and by the elites. Are we concerned that there may be another attempt on former President Trump's life, and that, there are other more malevolent things at play here?
So, having spent so many years overseas, I speak Russian. I've lived in that part of the world for many years. It's very sad that what I've seen in the past 10 years is my country degenerate to the level of countries I served in, whether it was a Tajikistan or a Kazakhstan or an Azerbaijan. Because what we see is North Korea level lying going on. I mean, the sudden enthusiasm for Kamala Harris, the Orwellian reaching back into internet entries from 3 years ago to change the fact that she's the most liberal U.S. senator.
Leave it there, but political panel, thanks so much. And I don't know about you, but I'm really ready for some precedented time. So we'll see what the future holds tomorrow night here on Jenna Ellis Tonight.